Ambassador Hana Kim stood in the massive chamber of the Galactic Concordat, surrounded by representatives from 47 different worlds. The air smelled strange, a mixture of different atmospheres blended for all the alien species present. She had been here many times before, always asking for the same thing, always receiving the same answer. The Terran request for defensive upgrades is denied, announced the Valak's representative, his three eyes blinking in sequence. The Concordat maintains peace through disarmament. This has been our way for 300 years. Hana felt her jaw tighten. This was the 23rd time Earth had asked. 23 times they had been refused. She wanted to argue, to shout, to demand they listen. But she simply bowed her head and returned to her seat. That was how things worked here. The strong made the rules. The weak followed them. As she sat down, Hana thought about the history lessons every human child learned. 80 years ago, humanity had reached the stars with hope and wonder. They had built a small fleet of exploration ships and defense vessels. Then they met the Valak's empire. The Valaks had not come with greetings. They came with an ultimatum. Join the Concordat and destroy your weapons or be destroyed yourselves. To prove they were serious, they had shown Earth what happened to species who refused. A recording of a planet being burned from orbit. Its surface turned to glass, millions dead in minutes. The species had said no to peace. The Valaks had given them silence instead. Earth had no choice. They dismantled their fleet, piece by piece, and joined the Concordat. For 80 years, humanity had lived under these rules. No warships, no weapons beyond simple patrol craft. Just peace, enforced by those stronger than them. But Hana did not know everything. Far from Earth, beyond the mapped territories where Concordat ships rarely traveled, something moved through the darkness of space. The TCS Defiant cut through the void like a blade. She was beautiful and deadly, covered in black armor that absorbed sensor scans. Her weapons were hidden beneath panels that could open in seconds. She had been built in secret, in an asteroid field that did not exist on any official map. Captain Minho Park stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the main view screen. He was young for a captain, only 35, but he had been chosen carefully. Smart, brave, and willing to do what others would not. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations, monitoring systems that were decades ahead of anything the Concordat knew about. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," said Jisoo Lee from the engineering station. She was younger than Minho, brilliant with technology, and one of the few people who truly understood how the Defiant worked. "Sensors are clear. No Concordat patrols in range." Minho nodded. "Good. Begin scanning for the colony ship. According to records, the Morning Star disappeared in this sector 3 weeks ago." The Morning Star was the 5th human colony ship to vanish near the rim. The Concordat had investigated each disappearance and declared them all navigation errors. Simple mistakes. Bad luck. But Admiral Yuna Choi, the head of Terran Defense Command, did not believe in that much bad luck. That was why she had authorized the Defiant's mission. The ship had been her idea from the start. 10 years ago, Yuna had convinced Earth's government that relying on the Concordat for protection was suicide. She had shown them the pattern. Human ships disappeared. Concordat investigations found nothing. It happened too often to be chance. So Earth had started building, slowly and secretly, the weapons they needed to protect themselves. "Captain, I'm picking up something," said Taeyang Shin from Tactical. He had once worked as a liaison with the Concordat fleet, before he learned what they really were. Debris field bearing 27 Mark V. It matches the Morning Star's hull signature. Minho felt his stomach drop. "Take us closer, carefully." As the Defiant approached, the debris came into view. Pieces of the colony ship floated in space, torn apart by weapons fire. But there was something else. Energy readings, active power sources. "Captain," Jisoo's voice was tight with anger, "I'm reading life signs. Human life signs. And a large structure hidden behind that asteroid. On screen." The view shifted, and everyone on the bridge went silent. Behind the asteroid was a massive station, clearly Valak's in design, and docked. At the station were the remains of not one, but 6 human colony ships, Figures moved between the ships and the station. Human figures in chains. "Those are slaves," Taiyang whispered. Minho's hands gripped his chair. The Concordat had not lost those ships. They had taken them. The Valaks had been capturing human colonists and putting them to work, all while telling Earth that it was just bad navigation, just accidents, just bad luck. "Captain, we need to move," Jisoo said. "If they detect us—" "Wait," Minho said. "Record everything, every detail. We need proof." For 10 minutes, the Defiant's sensors documented the horror. The station was a processing center. Humans were sorted, cataloged, and shipped to different Valaks facilities. Some would work in mines, some in factories, some would simply disappear. And no one in the Concordat would ever know, because no one was allowed to have ships strong enough to look. "Captain, multiple contacts jumping into the system," Taiyang called out. 3 Valaks cruisers. They're heading directly toward another ship. "Sir, it's a colony transport. The New Dawn, carrying 5,000 colonists." On the screen, a helpless Earth transport drifted through space, completely unaware of the warships moving to intercept it. Minho watched the Valak ships adjust their course. He knew what would happen next. The transport would be boarded. The colonists would be taken. And Earth would be told it was another navigation error. "Captain, orders?" Taiyang asked. Minho thought about his orders from Admiral Yuna. Observe only. Gather intelligence. Do not engage. Do not reveal the Defiant's existence. The mission was too important. Humanity had spent 10 years building in secret. If the Concordat learned about Earth's weapons now, they would come with everything they had. But Minho also thought about those 5,000 people on the New Dawn. Families, children, people who had left Earth looking for a better future, who trusted the Concordat to keep them safe. "Captain?" Jisoo was looking at him now, and he saw the same struggle in her eyes. Minho made his decision. Some things mattered more than orders. "Battle stations," he said quietly. "Charge all weapons. We're going in." Jisoo smiled, fierce and proud. "About time. Taeyang, transmit everything we've recorded back to Earth on the emergency channel. Whatever happens next, Admiral Yuna needs to see this." "Transmission away, sir." Minho stood up and walked to the front of the bridge. Through the view screen, he could see the Valak ships closing on the New Dawn. They had no idea what was about to happen. For 80 years, the Concordat had kept humanity weak and helpless. They had hidden behind words like peace while enslaving anyone too weak to fight back. That ended today. "All hands. This is the captain," Minho said over the ship-wide channel. "We're about to break every rule the Concordat has ever made. We're going to show them that humanity is not prey. Not anymore." The Defiant's engines flared to full power, and the ship leaped forward toward the battle that would change everything. The Valak's cruisers had no warning. One moment they were moving toward an easy target. The next moment their sensors screamed warnings about a ship that should not exist. A human warship appearing out of nowhere like a ghost made real. "Fire," Minho commanded. The Defiant's weapons came alive. Missiles streaked through space faster and more accurate than anything the Concordat had seen before. The first Valak's cruiser tried to raise shields, but it was far too slow. The missiles hit and the cruiser exploded in a ball of fire. The second cruiser managed to fire back, but its weapons could not lock onto the Defiant. The Earthship moved like nothing the Valaks had encountered, spinning and dodging with impossible grace. Jisoo's engines were a work of art, giving Minho control that no Concordat captain could match. "Their communications are going wild," Taeyang reported. "They're calling for help and broadcasting our presence to anyone who will listen." "Let them," Minho said. "The secret's out now anyway." The third cruiser tried to run, but the Defiant was faster. It caught up in seconds and fired a single shot through the cruiser's engine core. The Valak ship went dark, drifting helplessly in space. The second cruiser kept fighting, kept firing, growing more desperate with each missed shot. Finally, Taeyang's targeting system found its mark. The cruiser's reactor went critical and the ship broke apart. The whole battle had lasted 4 minutes. "Contact the New Dawn," Minho ordered. "Tell them they're safe. Then get teams over to that station. I want every human colonist off that nightmare and brought to safety." While the Defiant's crew worked to rescue the captives, the recordings they had sent were reaching Earth. In the Terran Defense Command Center, Admiral Una Choi watched the footage with a face like stone. Around her, other officers watched in horror as the truth played out on the screens. "How many?" someone whispered. "How many ships have they taken?" "At least 6 at that one station," Una said quietly. "We have to assume there are others. They've been doing this for years, maybe decades. What do we do?" Una stood up. "We tell everyone. Every news channel, every government, every human on Earth and in the colonies. They need to know what the Concordat really is." Within hours, the footage was everywhere. Humans watched in shock and anger as they saw their people in chains, saw the Valak ships attacking defenseless transports, saw the Defiant fighting back. The debate started immediately. Some people were horrified that Earth had built warships in secret. Others were furious that it had taken so long. But everyone agreed on one thing. They would never trust the Concordat again. The reaction spread beyond Earth. The battle footage reached other species, other worlds. And as it spread, something interesting happened. Other species started looking at their own records, their own disappearances, their own unexplained losses. The Concordat had been very busy. Ambassador Hana Kim was pulled from a meeting and shown the footage in a private room. She watched the Defiant fight, watched the rescue, watched everything. When it finished, she sat in silence for a long time. "You knew," she finally said to the officer who had shown her. "The military knew, Una knew. And no one told me? The Admiral thought it was safer if you didn't know, in case the Concordat suspected something." Hana wanted to be angry. She wanted to yell about being left out, about being made to look like a fool while she begged for permissions Earth did not need. But as she watched the footage again, watched human slaves being freed from that station, she understood. Where is the Defiant now? Heading back to Terran space with over 3,000 rescued colonists. And the Concordat? They've called an emergency session. They're demanding Earth explain itself. Hana smiled, cold and sharp. "Good. I have a few things to explain to them as well." The emergency session was chaos. Every species representative was shouting, demanding answers, making accusations. The Valaks insisted that the station had been a processing center for refugees, not a slave operation. The Thurian Collective, the other great power in the Concordat, demanded that Earth surrender the Defiant immediately and face justice for attacking peaceful ships. When Hana took the floor, the chamber went quiet. "Justice," she said, letting the word hang in the air. "The Concordat wants to talk about justice. Let me show you what justice looks like under your piece." She played the footage, all of it, the station, the slaves, the attack on the New Dawn, the Valak's cruisers hunting helpless civilians, 3,000 people saved from a life of slavery under the protection of the Concordat's law. "For 80 years, Hana continued, Earth has followed every rule. We dismantled our fleet. We accepted your patrols. We trusted you to keep our people safe. And while we trusted, you hunted us. One incident does not," the Valak's representative began. "One station," Hana cut him off. "One station we found by accident. How many others are there? How many other species have been losing ships and people while you investigated and found nothing?" The chamber erupted again, but this time the anger was directed at the Valaks. A Rithian representative stood up. "Holding data files. We have lost 17 colony ships in the past 50 years, the Rithian said, all in sectors patrolled by the Valaks, all declared navigation errors. I would like permission to review the Valaks patrol records for those sectors." "Our records are not," the Valaks started. "I have lost ships too," another representative called out. 12 ships in 20 years. All in Thurian space, more voices joined in, species after species standing up, naming ships and people lost under the Concordat's watch. The peace was cracking, and through the cracks, the truth was pouring out. On Earth, Admiral Una Choi addressed the planet in a broadcast that reached every human settlement. "For 300 years, the Concordat has promised peace in exchange for our weapons. We gave them our weapons. They did not give us peace. They gave us slavery. They gave us lies. Well, we are done with their lies." Behind her on the screens, 12 more warships appeared from hidden construction facilities scattered through Terran space. Each one was like the Defiant, built in secret, armed with weapons that made Concordat ships look like toys. "We will never be defenseless again," Una said. "We will never kneel again. Any Concordat ship that comes to Terran space with weapons charged will be considered hostile. Any species that wants to trade peacefully will be welcomed. But we will not surrender. We will not disarm. And we will not forget what they did to our people. The galaxy watched and held its breath. The Thurian Collective issued an immediate response. Earth has 24 hours to surrender all warships and weapon facilities. After that, the Concordat will take collective action to restore peace. On the Defiant, now approaching Earth with 3,000 grateful colonists, Minho received the ultimatum and laughed. Collective action, he said to Jisoo. They make it sound so official. It's war, Captain. They're going to come for us with everything they have. Let them come, Minho said, looking at the rescued families gathered in the Defiant's cargo base. Children playing, parents crying with relief, all of them alive because his crew had chosen to fight. We've been preparing for this for 10 years. They've been sitting comfortable, thinking no one would ever fight back. Let's see how well their peace holds up against people who have nothing left to lose. Jisoo smiled. The Admiral is going to give them a fight they'll never forget. She was right. Earth's answer to the ultimatum came exactly 24 hours later. Not with words, but with actions. Every human colony began constructing defense platforms. Every transport ship was armed. Every station was fortified. And the 13 warships of Earth's fleet moved into defensive positions around the core human worlds. The message was clear. Come if you dare, but we will not make it easy. The galaxy had not seen war in 300 years. Most species had forgotten what it looked like, what it cost, what it meant. But memories, even buried ones, have a way of rising when needed. In the weeks after Earth's defiance, something unexpected happened. The questions that had started in the Concordat chamber did not stop. Species began investigating their own losses, their own mysteries, and they found things that had been hidden for a very long time. A Rithian scientist named Tal found records that had been sealed for decades. Records of their colony ships, supposedly lost to navigation errors. But when he compared the ship paths to Valak's patrol routes, a pattern emerged. Every single lost ship had vanished exactly where Valak's forces were stationed. The mathematics were simple. This could not be chance. When Tal released his findings, the Rithian government demanded answers. The Valaks refused to respond. That refusal spoke louder than any words. Other species found similar patterns. The Kalesh discovered that their mining colonies near Thurian space had been paying protection fees for generations, forced to hand over resources or face unexplained equipment failures. The Draith found evidence that their entire government had been replaced 50 years ago. Key officials quietly removed and replaced with ones friendly to the Concordat. The peace, it turned out, had been built on a foundation of lies, threats, and disappearances. The Concordat had not brought unity. They had brought submission. Ambassador Hana Kim worked from morning to night, talking with representatives from other species. She had been angry at being kept out of Earth's military secrets, but now she understood her role. She was the voice, the connection, the one who could build bridges while warships prepared for what might come. They're afraid, she told Minister Dae Hong during a private meeting. Dae was Earth's diplomatic strategist, a man who understood that wars were won as much with words as weapons. All these species, they're afraid. The Concordat has kept them weak for so long they don't know how to be strong anymore. Then we teach them, Dae said simply. We show them that standing up is possible, that the Valaks and Thurians can be beaten. Can they, really? Dae looked at the star map on his wall, showing human space surrounded by potential threats. Ask me again after we survive the next few months. He was working on something ambitious. A meeting secret and dangerous with representatives from 7 species who were all questioning the Concordat. If they could form an alliance, a united front, they might have a chance. If the meeting was discovered, the Concordat would crush them all. The meeting happened on Luna, Earth's moon, in a facility that officially did not exist. Security was absolute. The representatives arrived on unmarked ships, their governments officially denying they had sent anyone. Hana stood with Dae as the others arrived. There was Tal, the Rithian scientist, a Kalesh mining administrator named Ven who had lost family to Concordat accidents, representatives from 5 other species, all carrying the weight of secrets and anger. Thank you for coming, Hana began. We know the risk you're taking. We know what the Concordat does to those who question them. We're past questioning, Tal said. The evidence is clear. The Concordat is built on oppression. The only question now is what we do about it. We form an alliance, Dae said. The Free Systems Alliance. Built on actual freedom, not enforced peace. We share technology, defend each other, and refuse to bow to threats. Easy to say, Ven replied. Harder to do. Earth has warships. What do we have? Patrol craft and mining vessels. The Concordat will crush us. Not if we're ready, Hana said. Earth didn't build its fleet overnight. We planned for years, built in secret, prepared for this exact moment. We can teach you. Share our technology. Help you defend yourselves, and in return, another representative asked. In return, you stand with us. When the Concordat comes, because they will come, we face them together. The discussion went on for hours. Arguments about risk, about capability, about whether any of this was even possible. But in the end, fear of the Concordat was stronger than fear of the unknown. 7 species signed the agreement that day, promising mutual defense and technology sharing. It was a small start, but it was a start. While diplomacy worked in secret, the Concordat was preparing for war. High Arbiter Velthun, the leader of the Valix Empire, gathered the Concordat defense fleet. Over 400 ships from a dozen species, the largest military force the galaxy had seen in 3 centuries. Many of the crew members were conscripts, forced to serve by governments afraid of Concordat retaliation. They did not want to fight, but they had no choice. Admiral Una Choi watched the fleet gather through long-range sensors and felt the weight of what was coming. Earth had 13 warships, skilled crews, advanced weapons, but only 13, against 400. We can't win a straight fight, her tactical officer said. Then we don't fight straight, Una replied. We fight smart. She activated Protocol Defiance, the battle plan she had been developing for a decade. Earth would not meet the Concordat in open battle. They would use every advantage, every trick, every dirty move that the Concordat had never needed to learn. The enemy had numbers. Earth had desperation. Captain Minho Park was given command of the Vanguard fleet, 5 warships including the Defiant. His job was to slow the enemy down, make them cautious, make them pay for every light year they advanced toward Earth. It's a suicide mission, his first officer said. It's a buying time mission, Minho corrected. We hold them off while the defense platforms come online, while the colonies evacuate, while Earth prepares. Jisoo Lee was working 20-hour days preparing for the battle. She had created something special, a weapon that did not destroy ships but disrupted their communications and coordination. The Concordat fleet was massive, but that was also its weakness. 400 ships needed perfect coordination. Take that away and they became chaos. Will it work? Minho asked her. Honestly? I don't know. I've never tested it on a fleet this large, but it's the best chance we have. On Earth, people prepared for war. Shelters were dug. Supplies were stockpiled. Evacuation plans were drawn up. Everyone knew what was coming. The Concordat had broadcast their intentions across every channel, declaring that Earth would be pacified for the good of galactic peace. But Earth had broadcast their own message, and it reached far beyond human space. It reached every species that had ever lost someone to Concordat protection, every world that had paid tribute to avoid accidents, every government that had bowed to threats. The message was simple. We will not kneel. If we fall fighting. But we will not surrender our freedom. The Concordat fleet arrived at Saturn 4 weeks later. High Arbiter Velthun stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the human defense positions. He saw the 5 warships arrayed near the rings. He saw the defense platforms. He saw Earth beyond, defiant and ready. This is your final chance, he broadcast to Earth. Surrender your weapons. Submit to Concordat authority. Return to peace. Admiral Una Choi's response was broadcast across the entire system. You've mistaken our silence for weakness. You've mistaken our patience for cowardice. You've mistaken peace for surrender. Let us correct those assumptions. The Concordat fleet began its advance, 400 ships moving in perfect formation. It should have been overwhelming. It should have been easy. The first mistake they made was underestimating how much humans had learned in 10 years of secret preparation. The second mistake was thinking that technology stood still. The third mistake was believing their own propaganda about the weakness of other species. As the fleet entered weapons range, Captain Minho Park smiled on the bridge of the Defiant. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. They had trained for this. They were ready. All ships, Minho commanded. Let's teach them about real war. The Battle of Saturn's rings was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Concordat fleet moved through space like a hammer falling on an anvil. 400 ships organized in perfect formation, advancing with the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. High Arbiter Velthun watched from his flagship as Saturn grew larger on the view screen. The human defenses looked pitiful by comparison. 5 warships, a handful of platforms, nothing that could stand against the might he commanded. Display formation, he ordered. It was a traditional concordate tactic, older than most species' space programs. The fleet would arrange itself in an intimidating pattern, weapons charged and visible, overwhelming the enemy with sheer power before a single shot was fired. Most conflicts ended here, with surrender rather than slaughter. The fleet began its display, ships moving into attack positions, weapon ports glowing with ready power. Velthun waited for the message from Earth, the plea for mercy, the offer of surrender. Instead, Admiral Unichoi's voice came through, calm and cold. "You've come a long way to die. Let's not keep you waiting." The Saturn system exploded into violence. The Concordate fleet learned their first lesson within seconds. Those defense platforms were not simple weapon stations. Each one was a cluster of launchers, firing missiles that moved faster and hit harder than anything the Concordate had encountered. 30 ships took critical damage before they could even react. "Return fire," Velthun commanded. "All ships, target those platforms." The fleet obeyed, turning their weapons on the platforms. Thousands of shots lit up the darkness. But the platforms were deep in Saturn's rings, hidden among billions of chunks of ice and rock. For every shot that hit, 100 more struck nothing but debris, and every time the Concordate ships fired, the platforms tracked their positions and fired back. Captain Minho Park watched the chaos from the Defiant and allowed himself a small smile. "Jisoo, activate the disruptor." "Activating now." The device she had created came online, broadcasting on frequencies the Concordate used for fleet coordination. It did not jam their communications completely. That would have been obvious and easy to counter. Instead, it introduced tiny delays, small errors, fragments of false data. In a small fleet, it would have been annoying. In a fleet of 400 ships trying to move in perfect formation, it was devastating. Ships lost track of their positions. Formations broke apart. Captains received conflicting orders or no orders at all. Within minutes, the perfect Concordate fleet had become a confused swarm of vessels trying to figure out what was happening. "Now," Minho commanded. "All ships attack pattern 7. The 5 human warships had been waiting at the edge of the rings, engines cold, weapons dormant, practically invisible against the dark. Now they came alive, accelerating to impossible speeds, diving into the Concordate formation like sharks among confused fish. The Defiant led the way, its weapons finding targets with brutal efficiency. 1 shot, 1 kill, then moving before the enemy could respond. The other warships followed the same pattern, striking and vanishing using the rings as cover, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Taeyang Xin at Tactical had spent years studying Concordate tactics. He knew how they thought, how they fought, what they expected, and he used that knowledge to predict their movements, putting the Defiant exactly where the enemy did not want them to be. 2 cruisers breaking off to pursue us, he reported. "They're trying to corner us against the inner ring." "Let them think they're succeeding," Minho said. "Then show them why that's a mistake." The Defiant led the cruisers deeper into the rings, seeming to flee. The Concordate captains thought they had an advantage. They thought wrong. The Defiant suddenly reversed direction, using maneuvers that should have torn a normal ship apart, and came at the cruisers from an angle they had not expected. Both cruisers died before they could adjust. Across the battlefield, the other human warships were creating their own chaos. The TCS Indomitable, commanded by Captain Sung Kang, had specialized in ramming tactics. Sung had argued with the other captains about it, insisting that sometimes the best weapon was the ship itself. Now he proved it, using the Indomitable's reinforced hull to smash through Concordate formations, scattering them like leaves in wind. But the Concordate fleet was learning. They had numbers, and even confused and disrupted numbers mattered. They began falling back into smaller groups, easier to coordinate, harder to ambush, and they started targeting the defense platforms with focused fire, taking them out one by one. "Captain, the Indomitable is in trouble," Jisoo called out. "They're surrounded, taking heavy fire." Minho saw it on his display. Sung's ship was trapped, 10 Concordate vessels pouring weapons fire into its shields. The Indomitable was tough, but not that tough. "Not for long. Set course to assist. Maximum speed. Sir, if we break position, the enemy will—" "I know. Do it anyway." The Defiant crossed the battlefield in seconds, arriving just as the Indomitable's shields were failing. Minho did not hesitate. All weapons fire at will. Taiyang, target their command ships first. The enemy vessels trying to kill Sung's ship suddenly had a new problem. The Defiant's weapons cut through their formations, forcing them to divide their attention. It bought time, but not enough. Minho, get out of here. Sung's voice came through, strained and tired. Save your ship. Not happening. Jisoo, how long until— Captain, the Indomitable is moving, Taiyang interrupted. They're accelerating directly toward that Valix dreadnought. Everyone on the Defiance bridge understood what Sung was about to do. The Indomitable's weapons were nearly depleted. Its shields were gone, its engines were damaged. But Sung had one weapon left. The ship itself. Sung, don't, Minho said. We can get you out of this. You need to stop that dreadnought, Sung replied. It's coordinating their whole right flank. Take it out and you break their formation. This is my call, Captain. My sacrifice. Use it well. The Indomitable crashed into the Valix dreadnought at full speed. The explosion was bright enough to be seen from Earth. Both ships were destroyed instantly. But the blast wave hit a dozen nearby Concordat vessels, and the loss of the dreadnought threw their right flank into complete chaos. Sung had been right. It was the move they needed. But Minho felt the loss like a physical pain. Captain, enemy ships are pulling back, Taiyang said quietly. The whole fleet is retreating to regroup. Minho looked at the tactical display. The Concordat had lost over 90 ships. The defense platforms had taken out 40. The warships had destroyed 50 more. The rest had been damaged by Sung's final attack, but Earth had paid a price too. 7 human warships had entered the battle. Now only 5 remained. The Indomitable was gone, and thousands of crew members had died defending the platforms. Get me casualty reports, Minho ordered, and someone find out if Sung made it to an escape pod. They found him 6 hours later in a damaged escape pod floating near the battle site. Sung was badly injured but alive. When they brought him aboard the Defiant, he looked at Minho and smiled weakly. Did it work? It worked. The fleet is retreating. We bought time. Good. That's what we came to do. The Battle of Saturn's Rings had lasted 6 hours. In that time, the galaxy had learned something important. The Concordat could be beaten. They could bleed. They could fail. In the Concordat fleet, as they retreated to regroup, something unexpected began happening. The conscript crews, the ones forced to fight, started questioning their orders. They had been told this would be easy, that Earth was weak, that resistance was pointless. They had been lied to. A Rithian cruiser captain named Kell made a decision. His crew had not wanted to fight. His species had suffered under Concordat rule, and Earth had just proven that standing up was possible. He broadcast on an open channel. This is Captain Kell of the Rithian vessel Dawn's Light. We will not fire on Earth. We will not fight for oppressors. Any ship that wishes to stand down, follow me. 5 ships broke formation and joined him. Then 10, then 20. The Concordat fleet, already damaged and demoralized, began falling apart from within. High Arbiter Velthun watched in fury as his perfect fleet crumbled. He ordered the defectors destroyed, but even his own commanders hesitated. They had lost too many ships. They had watched the Indomitable's sacrifice. They had seen what desperation could do. On Earth, Admiral Yuna Choi stood looking at the battle reports and allowed herself a moment of hope. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The weeks after the Battle of Saturn's Rings changed everything. High Arbiter Velthun retreated with what remained of his fleet, promising vengeance, swearing that the Concordat would return with overwhelming force. But his words sounded hollow now. The illusion of Concordat invincibility had been shattered in those 6 hours of battle. More importantly, the cracks in the Concordat's foundation were spreading. Captain Kell's defection had started something that could not be stopped. Across the galaxy, crews were questioning their orders. Governments were questioning their alliance. The evidence of Concordat crimes was everywhere now, impossible to hide or deny. On a Valix mining world, human slaves rose up, inspired by Earth's resistance. They seized weapons, took control of the facility, and broadcast images of their captivity to the galaxy. The Concordat tried to claim it was propaganda, but the slaves had records, documents, proof of 3 decades of exploitation. On a Thurian trade station, merchants refused to pay tribute. When Thurian enforcers arrived to collect by force, the merchants fought back. Other species joined them. The station erupted into chaos, and when it was over, the Thurian governor was in chains and the station was free. 5 species officially withdrew from the Concordat, declaring neutrality. They would not fight for the Valaks or Thurians. They would not enforce the old rules. They were done. Ambassador Hana Kim worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. The Free Systems Alliance had started with 7 species. Now it was 15, then 20, then 30. Each new member brought resources, knowledge, and most importantly, the courage to stand up. Earth shared its technology freely, helping other species build defenses, teaching them what humanity had learned during their decade of preparation. Minister Dai Hong coordinated it all, building a framework for cooperation that was everything the Concordat had pretended to be. Real mutual defense, real cooperation, real freedom to choose your own path. On Earth, factories worked around the clock building new ships, new weapons, new defenses. But they were also building civilian infrastructure for the species that had lost everything, standing up to the Concordat, medical supplies for wounded rebels, food for colonies that had been cut off from trade, ships to evacuate populations from war zones. Earth was proving that strength did not have to mean cruelty. That power could be used to protect rather than oppress. Captain Minho Park, promoted to Commodore after the battle, led a joint task force investigating other Concordat crimes. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. Entire species had been disappeared when they refused to join the Concordat. Not destroyed but enslaved, their homeworlds claimed as Concordat territory. Their people scattered to labor camps across the galaxy. One such species was the Navir, a peaceful people who had refused to disarm 80 years ago. The Concordat record said they had been pacified, their world left as a monument to the price of resistance. But Minho's task force found Navir slaves on a dozen different worlds still alive, still hoping for freedom. The rescue operation took 2 months and required coordination between 20 different species. When the last Navir slave was freed, their leader stood before the cameras and spoke to the galaxy. We thought we were alone. We thought everyone had forgotten us. But Earth remembered. The free systems remembered. You did not have to save us. Many of you did not even know we existed. But you came anyway. That is what real peace looks like. That is what real unity means. The speech went viral across every inhabited world. It became a rallying cry for everyone who had suffered under Concordat rule. The old empire was not just losing ships and territory. It was losing the narrative, the justification, the very idea that had held it together. The Thurian collective tried one final assault, gathering the remnants of the Concordat fleet for a desperate attack on Earth. But their fleet mutinied before it even reached Terran space. The crews had families, homes, futures. They refused to die for a government that had lied to them for 3 centuries. The Thurian leadership was overthrown by their own people. The new government immediately sued for peace, offering reparations and opening their records to investigation. The Valaks Empire held out longer, but even they could not fight the inevitable. When rebel forces reached their capital world, High Arbiter Velthan fled rather than face justice. He was never found. Some said he died in the escape. Others believed he was hiding somewhere in deep space, waiting for a chance to return. Either way, his empire was finished. The Concordat officially dissolved 307 years after its founding. The galaxy took a collective breath and began the hard work of building something better. Ambassador Hana Kim stood before the Assembly of the Federation of Free Worlds, the organization that had replaced the Concordat. It was different in every way that mattered. Membership was voluntary. Self-defense was a guaranteed right. No species could impose their will on another. And most importantly, the rules were made by all members equally, not dictated by the powerful. This is not the end of our work, Hana told the assembly. Building is always harder than destroying. Peace is harder than war. But for the first time in 300 years, we have a chance at real peace. Not the peace of submission, but the peace of mutual respect. Let's not waste it. The Federation passed its first major initiative that day. A joint task force to find and free all remaining slaves, all hidden prisoners, all the victims of Concordat rule. Captain Sung Kang, recovered from his injuries and given command of the new Indomitable II, volunteered to lead it. I've already died once for this cause, he said with a grin. Might as well make it count. Jisoo Lee became the head of the Federation's Defense Technology Council. Her job was to ensure that no species would ever be left helpless again. She worked with scientists and engineers from 50 different species, sharing knowledge, building better defenses, and always preparing for the possibility that someone else might try what the Concordat had done. Trust but verify, she told her team, and always keep building. Safety through strength, but strength used wisely. Admiral Una Choi retired 6 months after the Concordat's fall. She had carried the weight of preparing for war that everyone said would never come, had made the hard choices that had saved humanity. Now she could rest. At her retirement ceremony, Minho stood and spoke. Everyone said the Admiral was paranoid. Everyone said we didn't need weapons, that the Concordat would protect us. She knew better. She saw the truth when everyone else saw comfortable lies. Because of her, humanity survived. Because of her, we're free. Una simply nodded. She had never needed glory or recognition. She had needed her people to be safe. Mission accomplished. Nari Song, the colonist rescued from the first Valak station that Minho had found, became an advocate for displaced populations. She worked tirelessly to help refugees, to rebuild shattered communities, to give people hope after trauma. When asked why she dedicated her life to this work, her answer was simple. Someone saved me when they didn't have to. When it would have been safer to look away, I'm just paying it forward. 5 years after the Battle of Saturn's Rings, the Federation held an anniversary celebration. Ships from 100 different species gathered at Saturn, at the site where the old order had been broken. The wrecks had been cleared away, and in their place was a monument. Simple stone carved with the names of everyone who had died in that battle, human and non-human alike. Ambassador Hana Kim gave the anniversary speech, standing before representatives from worlds across the galaxy. 5 years ago, this was a battlefield. Today it's a memorial, but more than that, it's a reminder. Peace was never the absence of weapons. It was the absence of freedom. The Concordat promised peace and gave us chains. The Federation promises nothing but the chance to stand on our own, to defend ourselves, to choose our own future. That's all anyone really wants, the right to be free. The crowd cheered, but Hana held up her hand. But we cannot forget what we learned. Freedom requires vigilance. Peace requires strength. We must never become what we defeated. We must never use our power to oppress others. That is the real challenge. Not winning the war, but winning the peace that follows. On the Defiant, now a museum ship orbiting Earth, Captain Minho Park stood in the empty bridge and remembered. He remembered the choice he had made to engage those Valak's cruisers. The choice that had started everything. He had disobeyed orders, risked his mission, possibly doomed humanity by revealing their secret, and he would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. A young cadet approached him, part of a tour group visiting the historic ship. Sir, did you ever regret it? Starting the war? Minho thought about Sung's sacrifice, about the thousands who had died in the fighting, about the long, hard road to peace. Then he thought about the slaves freed, the species liberated, the galaxy changed. I didn't start a war, he said finally. I ended one. A war that had been going on for 300 years, hidden behind pretty words and false promises. We just made it visible. The cadet nodded and moved on. Minho stayed on the bridge a while longer, looking at the stars through the view screen. Out there, hundreds of species were building a future together. Not because they were forced to, not because they were too afraid to resist, but because they chose to. That was worth everything.